Welcome to the bold analysis. In the last 2 days, I did an analysis here and I said that the reason why there was a change of heart on Kenya Kwanza's side and why they toned down on anti-bipartisan talks rant was because of foreign backing. And as I mentioned that, it was in respect to the latest development. Now, yesterday, on Friday evening, former Delaware U.S. Senator Chris Coons jetted in the country, leading another delegation. Now, the gentleman you are seeing on your screen has been in this country 3 times since William Ruto was elected, and now this is his fourth trip. 3 days after election, he led a delegation to meet former President Uhuru Kenyatta in State House. And by that time, it was a discussion about transition. Then also in December, ahead of the US African tour, when Raila Odinga was calling for was planning some parallel Jamhuri Day on 12th December, Steve was in the country. And in March this year, when Raila was planning the first phase of mass action, he was in the country and met Rigathi Gachagua here. Rigathi Gachagua would then move to Mount Kenya and attend a Sunday service and disclose, I think he was speaking in Kirimbirimbi, this show that runs in Inoro. And he said that he confronted the senator because the senator asked him and rather advised and was supporting the fact that they needed a handshake with Raila Odinga for the country to destabilize. And he confronted himself, Rigathi was on record, that he confronted the US senator by asking him that why didn't Biden have a handshake with Trump after the election. And that statement probably did not run well with the US ranks and file. Now, the bipartisan talks are supposed to commence on Monday. It is a very intentional coincidence that the US Senator jetted in the country a weekend ahead of the Monday talks. And that is why I'm saying the Senator's mission in the country is very predictable. It is nothing other than the talks. It is nothing other than the talks between Raila Odinga and William Samoei Ruto. It also confirms what I analyzed in this podcast, that the talks had received foreign backing. And the delegation that the center is leading, I understand, is going to meet Raila Odinga and the team. They're also going to meet the government side, and we're also going to hold a closed-door meeting with the facilitators, or rather the mediators, led by the Obasanjo. Now, one of the things I can say without fear of contradiction is that US is backing the talks through funding. People need to know. If you see secretariat being formed, technical staff, a negotiation team, and even seeing the church now asking they want to be included, is because someone have seen that the talks are being funded. Now, why do you think US is pushing for a truce between Raila and Ruto? I want to explain that in this podcast. Kindly subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell and like our video. Thank you very much for those who are supporting our podcasts from every side of this country. US is supporting the truce. And I want to give you my 4 main reasons why that is happening. But before I look at those 4 reasons, let me bring your attention to the development that has been happening in this country about the Niger. What is happening in Niger is a threat to France. And there is a fear of decolonization messages also getting the East African front. Decolonization messages. Because the France, whatever is happening in Niger is, the Niger guys want to be decolonized by the France. And it's because of the Africanism. That message is sinking and is sweeping Africa. And of course, that is why the West and other world powers are so much interested and they would want to be here. Unlike China and Russia, the US, specifically with the Britain, or rather with the UK, have been so much interested into the democratic processes in Africa, and especially in Kenya. They've been playing a key role on that. The US is clearly unhappy with the killings, the police brutality, despite the fact that they backed Ruto. The police brutality, and I think after the second phase of mass action, one of the biggest contention to the political players and even the sovereign, according to the intelligence, is the discussion on the police brutality. And the US seems to be very uncomfortable with that because it's creating hostility. And that hostility will then be extended to any person or any organization that is supporting William Ruto. They're looking at this matter keenly. Remember, just developing from that police brutality, there's some 10,000 Kenyans that have gone to court to force some secession activities. So because of this, the US knows very well that they backed William Ruto for the first time in the history of our elections. The US diplomats and the Britain were camping in Bomas of Kenya before the results were announced, and they stayed there. They've never been making such appearance, even when Uhuru Kenyatta was being announced. So it's clear that they're trying to get a recourse about the way the protests were handled. Number two, the US have interest in these talks to push that truce because somewhere in the background, a discussion about a referendum is coming. And I can tell you that a referendum in Ruto's first term is something that Ruto will not even want to dream of, because it is going to be a vote among the sovereign that will clearly be used to pass vote of no confidence against William Ruto. And if you want to dash off the hopes of 2027, is you allow the country to have a referendum. I see a possibility that US might back this, because look at the handshake between Uhuru and Raila. Handshake between Uhuru and Raila actually birthed some BBI, or a constitutional review process, even though things turned, the tides turned later. I see a possibility that the West could actually use a referendum push to checkmate William Ruto, because there's been a bit of the disconnect, and William Ruto has been inconsistent in terms of his foreign policy. If you look at the speeches he's been making in the other African countries, bashing the US and the UK on how they have been treating the African presidents by bungling them in one car, in one bus, and of course taking group photos, and they only come back to their country with the photos. Those are messages that show very clearly that there is no firm grip between Ruto administration and the West, despite the fact that they actually played a vital role in their election. There is something that someone raised to me recently, that the IBC was trying to vouch for an election model and a possibility of election materials being printed in the country here. And of course, that is something that has always been mentioned. But I will not want to delve in it. But that is also cutting ties with the foreign powers that normally infiltrate our elections. The other third mission I'm seeing is US would want to demolish, and I'm using the word demolish for lack of a better one, Kenya Kwanza leaders that have been on their radar. Two reports. One, US representative for trade was in the country and declined to meet Moses Kuria over his faulty mouth, saying that the caliber of a CS, that in the name of Moses Kuria, is not a person he will meet. And he came and met William Ruto in State House, but when he was called, and of course declined to meet Moses Kuria. And the reason being is about his faulty mouth, or the way he's bad mouthing. There's another report that also emerged that there are some leaders within Kenya Kwanza that have been on US radar and have actually been banned from traveling to the US because of their actions or their input on the current political activities happening in the country, especially on the violence. So this has been in the radar, and I think US will also push for this truce, because it is through this that then they can push a united front to punish those leaders. It is very clear that there are elements within Kenya Kwanza that have been pushing and have been behind the violence. Lastly, America would want to use Raila clout to make Ruto leaning to the West. That will be it. Because by any chance, if Ruto become a little stubborn, that is what happens. They put in it and then they start bringing you other forces. So it is a clear something about interest. And I've always said this, it is always about their interest. It has always not been about our interest. Someone asked me, my friend Rito was asking me, what is their interest apart from the military base in Mombasa? What is American interest apart from that base? The others have been reported as development projects and interest, but it's some give and take. It's about, we give you this, we take this one. The other day, the World Bank was in Uganda warning them that if they continue the anti-homosexual rules, then they are going to be banned from World Bank funding. So that is it, what I'm saying. It's really not a one way, it's a two way. Give us this, we give you this. On this one, the Rigathi Camp will really be hiding, because he's one man that really hated, Rigathi really hates the US Senator or the discussion about handshake. But then it also shows that the truth is gaining momentum. It is a very clear indication that Ruto was subdued into this. That even after spending the whole week, almost 5 days in Mount Kenya, running anti-talks propaganda, until Ndindi Nyoro going to beg that to walk out of the talks. But with this, it's a very clear signal that it's either talks or talks, whether he get the likes or dislikes. That's my take.